It's 1968 in a dimly lit, crowded hall in Seattle, Washington. The air is thick with anticipation and a hint of hostility. This isn't just any gathering, it's a high-stakes evaluation, a pivotal moment in martial arts history. Bruce Lee, the young innovator from Hong Kong who had been shaking up the traditional world of fighting with his bold new philosophy, is about to face his toughest critics yet. They've assembled the cream of the crop, the toughest evaluators from established martial arts schools, seasoned fighters with years of brutal training under their belts, and skeptical judges who have seen it all. These men are no strangers to combat. Their bodies are scarred from countless sparring sessions, their egos inflated by titles and triumphs in rigid, ancient disciplines like karate and kung fu. They're here with one goal: to dismantle Bruce Lee's revolutionary methods. His Jeet Kune Do, a fluid, adaptive style that blends Eastern and Western techniques, is seen as heresy. Too reckless, they mutter. Too unorthodox. Whispers ripple through the room. This upstart thinks he can rewrite the rules. We'll show him. The hall itself feels alive with tension. Wooden floors creak under the weight of dozens of muscular figures, all dressed in simple G uniforms or street clothes, arms crossed defiantly. The walls are lined with banners from various dojos, symbols of tradition that Bruce is daring to challenge. Overhead lights cast long shadows, highlighting the stern faces and clenched fists. You can almost smell the sweat and liniment, hear the low hum of murmured challenges. Everyone, absolutely everyone, expects chaos. They brace for an explosion of fists and fury, imagining flying kicks, thunderous punches, and the raw clash of bodies in a no-holds-barred demonstration. After all, how else do you prove dominance in a room full of warriors? But then there's Bruce Lee. Standing at the center, he's a picture of serene composure amid the storm. At just 27 years old, he's not the biggest guy in the room, 5'7", and lean, with a physique honed by relentless discipline rather than sheer bulk. His dark hair is neatly combed, his expression calm, almost meditative. He doesn't flinch, doesn't raise his voice, doesn't even clench a fist. Instead, he simply stands there, breathing steadily, his eyes, those piercing, intense eyes, slowly scanning the crowd. It's as if he's reading every soul in the room, sensing their doubts, their aggressions, their hidden fears. And in mere seconds, something extraordinary happens. The room's aggression begins to dissolve. The murmurs fade. The crossed arms loosen. The skeptical glares soften into uncertainty. No blows are exchanged. No shouts erupt. The anticipated fury evaporates into a stunned silence, so profound you could hear a pin drop. Bruce hasn't moved a muscle in violence, yet he's already won. How? Through sheer presence, the unbreakable aura of a man who has mastered not just his body, but his mind. Dramatic pauses throughout for emphasis. Slow build of tense, orchestral music swelling to a subtle crescendo before cutting to silence. Visuals. Open with wide establishing shot of the packed hall, panning over the diverse crowd of fighters, close-ups on their hardened faces, tattooed arms, and ready stances. Contrast with Bruce entering calmly, centered in frame. Use high-contrast black and white or sepia tones for a cinematic, legendary feel. Slow-motion sequences. Fighters shifting uneasily, a bead of sweat rolling down a challenger's temple. Bruce's steady gaze locking onto individuals. Build anticipation with quick cuts between expectant faces. Then linger on the spreading silence, eyes widening in awe, bodies relaxing involuntarily. End with a frozen frame on Bruce's unflinching stare, fading to the stunned quiet. Part 2. Setup and rising tension. 021, one expanded version. The event unfolding in that packed Seattle hall wasn't a casual gathering or a friendly sparring session. It was an official evaluation, a make-or-break trial for Bruce Lee's emerging system, Jeet Kune Do. By 1968, Bruce had already built a reputation in Seattle as a trailblazer. He had arrived in the city years earlier as a teenager from Hong Kong with little money and big dreams. He worked odd jobs, taught martial arts in basements and small gyms, studied philosophy at the University of Washington, and slowly attracted students who were drawn to his no-nonsense, practical approach to combat. Traditional martial arts schools emphasized rigid forms, katas, and years of repetitive drilling. Bruce rejected that. He preached adaptability, efficiency, and using whatever worked best in a real fight, blending Wing Chun roots with boxing footwork, fencing principles, and his own innovations. To many old-school masters, this was dangerous heresy. Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist, wasn't just a style. It was a philosophy that challenged centuries of tradition. The lead judge that day was a hardened veteran, a man with decades steeped in classical martial arts. His face was lined from years of strict discipline, his posture rigid like the kata he taught. He had come with a group of like-minded evaluators, karate black belts, kung fu practitioners, and fighters who prided themselves on following the pure paths. They viewed Bruce's ideas of fluidity and non-telegraphed movements as reckless, undisciplined, even disrespectful. "Your methods lack structure," the judge declared in a deep, authoritative voice that carried across the silent hall. "They invite chaos in a real confrontation. Prove you can handle real pressure without turning everything into a wild brawl." His words hung heavy, laced with skepticism and a touch of contempt. The room buzzed in agreement, low murmurs of, "Show us. He's too flashy." Traditional ways have survived for a reason. The challengers stepped forward one by one. Burly assistants from the traditional schools, battle-tested men with thick forearms, calloused knuckles, and the kind of confidence that comes from dominating dojos for years. They cracked their knuckles, rolled their shoulders, and sized Bruce up with smirks. Some flexed subtly, others bounced lightly on their toes, ready to explode into action. The air crackled with arrogance. These were men who believed power came from size, strength, and established technique. They expected Bruce to falter, to reveal the weakness in his unorthodox style. But Bruce remained a study in contrast. He stood like a shadow in the center of the storm, unyielding, almost serene. At 5'7" and lean, he wasn't imposing in the conventional sense, yet his presence filled the room. His breathing was deep and measured, chest rising and falling with perfect control. His dark eyes moved slowly, deliberately, taking in every detail. The judges' crossed arms, the assistants' tense postures, the subtle shifts in weight as they prepared to attack. There was no bravado, no posturing, just calm certainty. He knew something the others didn't yet grasp. True power isn't always in the fist or the kick. It's in the mind that commands respect before the first move is made. He understood that presence alone could shift the energy of an entire room, turning aggression into hesitation without ever raising a hand. The tension built like a coiled spring. Everyone waited for the explosion. But Bruce simply waited, centered, ready. His stillness was louder than any shout. Visuals. Quick flashbacks to Bruce's early Seattle days, grainy-style shots of him teaching in a small basement gym, practicing on a wooden dummy, studying books on philosophy and boxing. Cut to the judge's stern, weathered face delivering his challenge. Show the challengers stepping forward in slow-motion, muscles flexing, eyes narrowed. High-contrast lighting isolates Bruce in the frame, shadows playing across his calm features. Slow zoom in on his steady breathing, the subtle rise and fall of his shoulders. Murmuring crowd fades to near silence as the camera circles him, emphasizing his isolation, yet total command of the space. Sensory details through sound design, echoing footsteps, heavy breathing from the challengers, the faint creak of the wooden floor, building orchestral tension with low strings. The silence in the Seattle hall had become electric, every eye fixed on the center of the room where Bruce Lee stood motionless. The first challenger, one of the burly assistants from a traditional kung fu school, stepped forward with confidence bordering on arrogance. He was broad-shouldered, thick-necked, hands rough from years of heavy bag work and wooden dummy training. Without a word, he seized Bruce's right wrist in a powerful grip, twisting it inward with deliberate, crushing force, the kind of lock that had ended many sparring sessions before they even began. Most fighters would have tensed, yanked back, or countered with a strike. Bruce did none of those things. He didn't resist the twist at all. Instead, he relaxed his arm just enough, letting the incoming energy flow through him like water around a stone. With the subtlest rotation of his wrist and shoulder, a movement so small it was almost invisible, he redirected the force. The assistant's grip suddenly found nothing solid to hold onto. His own momentum betrayed him. His hand slipped off harmlessly, leaving him off balance for a split second. No punch, no kick, no shout, just a quiet, effortless redirection. The assistant blinked in confusion, staring at his empty hand as if it had betrayed him. The room's tension ratcheted higher. A second challenger, taller and heavier, moved in next. This one didn't bother with subtlety. He lunged forward in a full aggressive charge, arms wide, aiming to clinch and overpower Bruce through sheer mass and momentum. Again, Bruce didn't meet force with force. He stepped slightly off the line of attack, absorbing the rush with a soft, yielding pivot of his hips and torso. As the bigger man barreled past, Bruce placed one calm hand on his opponent's shoulder and the other lightly on his elbow, guiding rather than stopping. The challenger stumbled forward a step, then steadied himself mid-stride, suddenly aware he had been neutralized without ever making solid contact. His face flushed with surprise. The smirk was gone. By now the murmurs had died completely. Every fighter in the room felt the shift. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. The lead judge himself stepped forward. This was the final test. The veteran martial artist extended his thick forearm toward Bruce, palm up, in a classic challenge pose, inviting him to demonstrate control. "Show me," he said flatly. Bruce accepted the invitation without hesitation. He placed his fingers lightly on the judge's wrist, applying slow, precise, increasing pressure to a single pressure point along the radial nerve. At the same time, he subtly shifted his own body weight forward, unbalancing the judge's stance ever so slightly. The veteran's arm began to tremble, not from pain, but from the sudden inability to maintain equilibrium. His knees buckled just a fraction. He instinctively stepped back to regain footing. Bruce released immediately, stepping away with perfect courtesy. One single piercing glance from Bruce had said everything. He had read the judge's intention, his ego, his hidden doubt, and dismantled it all without raising his voice or throwing a single strike. Step by step, challenge by challenge, the anticipated explosion never came. The room watched in growing disbelief as raw aggression met calm precision and simply dissolved. The fight that everyone expected never materialized because Bruce had already ended it psychologically, tactically, completely before it could even start. Short, punchy sentences mixed with longer descriptive beats for dramatic pacing, sound effects. Sharp intake of breath after each redirection, heavy footsteps fading into sudden quiet, the faint creak of shifting weight. Visuals. Slow motion captures every subtle movement, Bruce's wrist rotating like liquid, the assistant's grip sliding away in disbelief. Extreme close-ups on eyes. Bruce's calm, laser-focused intensity contrasting with widening pupils and shocked expressions on the challengers. High-contrast shadows carve dramatic lines across faces. Quick cuts between each interaction build suspense, then long, lingering shots on the spreading silence and stunned reactions. Orchestral score rises with low, pulsing strings, punctuated by moments of near-total quiet, after each successful control. The Seattle Hall, moments earlier crackling with barely contained aggression, had transformed. What began as a room full of warriors primed for battle now stood in near total stillness. The challengers, the burly assistants, the towering lunging fighter, even the hardened lead judge had all stepped back, not out of fear, not because they had been hurt or overpowered in any conventional sense. They retreated because something deeper had taken hold. Awe. Pure, undeniable awe at what they had just witnessed. Bruce Lee had taught them without ever speaking a full sentence at first. He taught through action, or more accurately, through masterful inaction. Every redirection, every subtle yield, every calm glance had carried a silent lesson, mind over body. In traditional martial arts, dominance was often measured by who could strike hardest, fastest, or most violently. Bruce flipped that script entirely. He showed that true control begins long before contact is made. His presence alone had commanded respect, where brute force would have only invited more resistance. The fighters felt it in their bones the moment they realized their aggression had nowhere to land. It simply dissolved against his centered calm. The judge, the man who had entered the room certain of his superiority, now stood with shoulders slightly lowered. His stern expression had softened into something closer to reverence. He had spent decades mastering forms, perfecting techniques passed down through generations, believing that power came from rigidity and repetition. In those few minutes, Bruce demonstrated something far more profound, knowing when to stop, knowing how to control chaos not by meeting it head-on, but by letting it pass harmlessly by. Restraint wasn't weakness. It was the ultimate weapon. The judge felt the weight of that truth settle over him like a quiet revelation. He had come to judge Bruce. Instead, Bruce had judged the limits of his own understanding. One by one, the other fighters lowered their guards. Arms that had been crossed in defiance now hung loosely at their sides, fists unclenched, shoulders relaxed. The energy that had filled the room like a storm cloud simply evaporated. No one spoke for what felt like an eternity. The silence wasn't awkward, it was respectful. It was the sound of egos being quietly dismantled and rebuilt around a new understanding. Bruce had stopped a room full of fighters without throwing a single punch. Not a shout was needed, not a drop of blood was spilled. He had done it with nothing but his mind, his unbreakable focus, his tactical brilliance, his absolute mastery of self. In that moment, he proved what he had always believed. The highest form of combat is the one that ends before it begins. Restraint, awareness, presence, these were the real weapons of a legend. And the room knew it. They had come expecting to see a fight. What they received was a lesson in power that would stay with them for the rest of their lives. Narration slows here for emotional weight, longer pauses between sentences to let the gravity sink in. Music swells gradually, deep, resonant strings giving way to a warmer, uplifting undertone. Visuals. Slow-motion montage of reactions, fighters' faces shifting from tension to wide-eyed wonder, guards dropping, the judge exhaling slowly as realization dawns. Close-ups linger on Bruce's serene, almost gentle expression, contrasting the earlier intensity. Wide shots show the entire room falling into reverent, quiet bodies easing back, space opening around Bruce like he's radiating calm. Subtle repeat of the viral hook woven in. Without throwing a single punch, the room fell silent. High-contrast lighting softens slightly, shifting from stark shadows to a warmer glow, symbolizing the emotional shift from confrontation to understanding. Final lingering shot. Bruce standing centered, untouched, surrounded by humbled warriors. Bruce Lee walked out of that Seattle Hall in 1968, the same way he had entered, calm, composed, untouchable. He didn't need to throw a single punch to prove his strength. He didn't need to shout, dominate, or destroy anyone to win the room. He simply stood in his truth, mastered, centered, complete, and the world around him rearranged itself to match that reality. The fighters who had come to challenge him left with something far more valuable than a victory or a defeat. They carried away the memory of a man who controlled chaos without ever raising his voice or his fist. They witnessed proof that real power isn't loud, it isn't violent, it isn't measured in broken bones or knocked out opponents. Real power is quiet, precise, internal. It begins and ends with self-mastery. Bruce didn't fight that day to show how strong he was. He fought without fighting to show how strong a man can become when he masters himself first. He had spent years forging that inner steel, training his body to near perfection, studying philosophy from East and West, dissecting every fighting art he encountered, stripping away what was useless, keeping only what worked. But the greatest weapon he ever developed wasn't a kick, a punch, or a technique. It was his mind, his unbreakable focus, his ability to remain still when everything around him screamed for action. That presence turned potential enemies into silent students in seconds. This is the legend core truth Bruce Lee left behind, not just for martial artists, but for anyone who wants to move the world in any direction. Master yourself first. Control your breath, your thoughts, your reactions. Develop presence so strong that chaos bends around you instead of through you. Then and only then can you influence anything or anyone outside yourself with true power. So look at your own life right now. Where is the chaos? Where is the challenge, the pressure, the doubt, the noise trying to pull you off center? The room full of fighters isn't always literal. Sometimes it's deadlines, critics, inner demons, toxic relationships, fear itself. The question isn't, how will you fight back? The real question is, what are you mastering today? What part of yourself are you forging right now so that when the moment comes, you don't have to throw a punch to win? Because the greatest victories are the ones that end before they begin, one in silence, one in stillness, one inside. Bruce Lee didn't just stop a room full of fighters. He showed every one of us how to stop the battles that matter most, without ever losing ourselves in the fight. Fade to black. His silhouette walks away through the parting crowd, calm, purposeful, legendary. The music rises to a powerful, inspiring close, deep drums giving way to soaring strings. Final frame lingers on his back, strong and serene, disappearing into light. What are you mastering today? Motivational delivery. Narration delivers the final lines with slow, deliberate emphasis, long pauses after key questions to let them land emotionally. Music builds from quiet reverence to triumphant uplift, peaking on the last line before fading out. Visuals. Cinematic slow-motion tracking shot follows Bruce walking through the now silent, respectful crowd fighters on both sides, watching in quiet admiration. High-contrast backlighting creates a glowing halo around him, turning him into an almost mythic figure. Cut to wide shot of the hall emptying behind him, then close on his steady stride. Final freeze-frame silhouette against a bright doorway, symbolizing untouchable mastery and forward momentum. Subtle on-screen text or voice echo of the closing question, "What are you mastering today?" to drive home the personal call to action for maximum viewer retention and impact.